Hello, everybody. See if we can get this thing a little bigger. Maybe, can we? There we go. Come on now. There we go. All right. So last time we talked about the end of the Johnson years and Nixon became president. Nixon kind of got everybody out of Vietnam. Remember, he went to China, and he made nice with China and kind of achieved this thing called détente with the Soviet Union. So Nixon, strangely enough, pretty successful president. He got reelected in 1972, and he won big over the Democrat. I mean, look at that map right down there at the bottom. All those red states are the states that Nixon won. So I mean, if you squint down there, looks like McGovern won the state of Massachusetts. I mean, like biggest landslide in history, and he cheated. I mean, it was the craziest thing. Like you know you're going to make 100 on a test, and on the last question you cheated. You cheat. You know, you copy out somebody else after you got all the first questions right. It was crazy that he cheated in this election. But guys working for him broke into this motel right here. It's Watergate Hotel, where the Democratic headquarters were. His opponent was named George McGovern. He was going to beat McGovern. No need to cheat. He cheated. You know, they're spying on the Democrats. All right. Okay, so he may not have ordered it. I don't know if he ordered it or not, but he was involved in the cover-up. He lied about his connection with the folks who broke into the Watergate. And Nixon had taped everything he did as president. When presidents stepped down, they set up their own presidential libraries for historians to go research their presidency. So Nixon had taped all his conversations for, historians to study later. And so people want to know, like investigators want to know if he had anything about the Watergate. So they said, well, turn over these tapes. And he didn't want to do it. All right. And they made him turn it over eventually, and it sounded like he had something to do with it. It's pretty clear he had something to do with this break-in. And so his own party told him he was not only going to be impeached, but he was going to get convicted, so he resigned instead. So, I mean, it's a strange story. He got a pretty successful president. Somebody got reelected in a landslide in 1972, and then he ends up resigning. Only president to ever resign. And it's a strange picture. He's fixing to get on the helicopter to leave, and he's throwing up the victory signal right there. All right, but that's the story of Nixon's resignation. So Ford, his vice president, becomes president, and he pardons Nixon. A president can just forgive somebody of a crime if they want to. So he pardons Nixon after Nixon became president, and promise, but that was an unpopular thing for Ford to do, because the Americans were kind of mad about Nixon, so it made Ford unpopular. So this guy from Georgia, Jimmy Carter, who's a very religious guy, so he promises that he's never going to lie to the American people, and so he defeated Ford in 1976. So our only Georgia president, Jimmy Carter, got elected in 1976. He had a real good. One of the guys working for him, Burt Lance, was from Calhoun. There's a lot of things around here named after Burt Lance. Burt Lance was one of his closest friends and top advisors. Okay, so don't worry about Chavez. That was from the last one. All right, answer those questions. Okay, let's see. Okay, Carter in the Middle East. All right, so Carter becomes president. Carter deals with the Middle East a lot while he was president. Israel was a country that was created for the Jewish people after World War II. We know that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, and so the survivors said, we would have been better off if we'd had our own country. Jewish people didn't have their own country. So the United Nations created this country of Israel in 1947. Only problem was there were already people living there. There was already a place called Palestine. People lived there, were called Palestinians. All right, so it was controversial when this country of Israel was created. So in 1967 and 1973, the biggest Arab country in the Middle East, Egypt, attacked Israel twice, and they lost big time both times. The United States gave weapons to Israel, and using American weapons, Israel was able to defeat Egypt twice. So what ends up happening, the president of Egypt comes to Israel and says he wants to make peace, and they go to the United States, and they meet with Carter at the presidential retreat. The president has a place he goes outside Washington, D.C. for vacation. And it's called Camp David. And so he achieved peace between these two countries at Camp David. And so that was like Carter's greatest achievement as president. All right. Hey, so the agreement was called the Camp David Accords. Sorry about that. I had to go inside. I'm making the tape outside, and it's getting cold out here. Don't want to catch a cold. If I catch a cold, it'll freak everybody out if I start sneezing and sniffling, So we don't want that. So I went inside and got a coat. Sorry. Okay, so back at it. So there they are. They're signing this agreement. That's called the Camp David Accords. The Egyptian president here, his name was Anwar Sadat. The Israeli president's name is Menachem Begin. Carter's a very religious man, and both of these guys were religious, and he was able to talk to them about their religions, like the religion of Christianity and Judaism and Islam share a lot of the common people from their history, Abraham and Moses, some of those guys. And so he's able to talk to them about religion. And those two countries, there's a lot of trouble in the Middle East still, but those two countries have been at peace ever since. Okay, another country in the Middle East really hurt Carter. The Shah of Iran had been an ally in the Middle East. Most countries in the Middle East didn't like us because we were friends with Israel. But this guy was a dictator, so he was friends with us, but his own people didn't like him, and they overthrew him. And Carter let him come to the United States for cancer surgery. He was sick with cancer. And so that made Iranians mad, and so they broke into the American embassy and took, I think it was 62 hostages. They let a few of them go, but they kept 50 of them for over a year, and Carter never could get them out. And so that guy right there, the Ayatollah Khomeini, was the leader of the Iranian Revolution. And Carter, he could have bombed Iran and killed a bunch of Iranians, but the hostages would have gotten killed. So for over a year, those hostages were there, and Carter just couldn't get them out, and it really kind of hurt his presidency. He was only a one-term president. Ronald Reagan ended up defeating him. Okay. So take a look at those. That's when I should have done it. I'm sorry. I should have gone and got my coat while y'all were looking at these. All right, and then the last one then. All right, so we're looking at some things. Well, we're going to take time out from presidential politics to look at the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court became kind of controversial in the 50s and the 60s. And it's the Warren Court. Earl Warren's the guy in the middle, and the leader of the Supreme Court is called the Chief Justice. There's 9 people on the Supreme Court, and the leader's the chief. And from 1953 to 1969, Earl Warren was the Chief Justice. The most famous the Warren Court cases was Brown versus Board of Education. But there were a lot of cases like that where the court seemed to be expanding people's rights and liberties, so much so that it got kind of controversial. All right, so you got this court case, Gideon versus Wainwright. This fella, Clarence Earl Gideon, got accused of robbing a pool hall. Like the jukebox was broken into, and somebody had stole $72 worth of quarters. All right, so he got arrested. They found him with a bunch of quarters, and he got arrested, but he couldn't afford a lawyer, so he tried to defend himself in court, and he didn't know what he was doing. And so he got convicted, and so he ends up appealing his conviction, goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Warren Court ruled that he should have had an attorney paid for. And so that's why anytime you see somebody get arrested on TV, they say that you got the right to remain silent. Then the next thing they say, you have the right to an attorney if you can't afford one, want to be appointed for you. So attorneys have been appointed ever since this Gideon case. Turned out he didn't do it. He got a retrial, and the chief witness against him was the guy who actually stole all the quarters from the jukebox. All right, what else did they say? You have the right to remain silent. So this fella, Ernesto Miranda, kidnapped a lady. I think he raped her too. I mean, he wasn't a real nice guy. He was a bad guy. All right, and he confessed, but his rights weren't read to him, and he didn't know he didn't have to confess. So his lawyer says, his rights have been violated. His Fifth Amendment rights, no self-incrimination. Remember, we learned the Bill of Rights. And so he got set free because he didn't know about his rights. Now, here's the rest of the story. When he got set free, he went to a bar and he got in a fight, and the guy he got in a fight with killed him. And ironically enough, one of the first people to ever have their rights read to him, Miranda rights, these are called Miranda rights, named after this guy, was the guy who killed Miranda. All right, but the right to remain silent is called the Miranda rights. Okay. Yeah, all right. So there's that. Take a look at that.